Hello and welcome back to the channel. Amber here, joined once again by Laura in audio format today. House of the Dragon, episode 4. We've got kinslaying, we've got dragon death, we've got highs, we've got lows. This was an episode. First thoughts on this one?
I feel like this is our sad episode of the season. You know?
Yeah.
Like, this is every season has their, like, really sad episode. This is it. It's right at the midpoint. They've got it right where they want it.
I definitely have felt like I don't want to leave my dog alone today. Like, I'm kind of just like, oh, that was sad. But, like, what are we doing with these dragons? Like, did they ever think, like, instead of using them as weapons, they could just, like, chill? That'd be great.
Like, I guess if we're going to already jump to that point, let's jump to that point. This really exemplifies why sending the dragons to war doesn't work very well when both sides have dragons.
Yep.
This is a lot different than when Aegon the Conqueror brought the Seven Kingdoms to heal with his dragons. Nobody else had them.
That's a good point.
And so now we get to see what it's like when both sides have dragons. And honestly, again, it's the small folk taking huge losses.
Right? I did appreciate whatever lord it was at Rook's Rest when they're like, we got to get you inside. And he's like, I'm going to hang out and watch this, I think. Like,
I did appreciate that too.
Firework display.
But I have a couple questions about that scene. And they're not necessarily related to the actual scene itself. But you know how when Aegon is leaving the dragon pit with Sunfire and he's in a really like down mood, but then he sees Sunfire and Sunfire kind of calls out to him and he immediately starts genuinely smiling.
Yes.
And then we have those last moments between Rhaenys and Meleys where you can tell that they're like deeply connected and ready to die together. And then we have Aemond and Vhagar. And it kind of seems like Aemond really doesn't have that same connection with Vhagar that everybody else seems to present with their dragon.
We have the scene where, Vhagar kills Luke, and this felt kind of like, similar but different.
Like an intentional version of that.
Yeah, this felt intentional, but also, like, at this point, do we just assume that Vhagar has dementia? Like,
I don't know.
Like, she's just napping and, like, seems legitimately annoyed when he's like, all right, let's go. And he's like, no, wait. And Vhagar is like, God, just let me sleep.
I have to wonder, because like I said, it seems like everybody else has these deep, heartfelt connections to their dragons. And he's just like, Vhagar serves a purpose.
Yeah, that's true. He's definitely using the dragon as a weapon more so than the others where they have that kind of, like the modern equivalent to like where it's a pet.
Yeah.
Like there's a connection there. But I don't know, like I think it's just what's so weird to me is that I guess there could be some like plausible deniability where it's like, oh, like, it was an accident. But when Aegon wakes up, he's going to be like, he did it.
Well,
like how are they going to explain that?
Temporary memory loss.
Right? Is it going to be like a Bran falls out of the or is pushed out of the tower situation where he doesn't remember what happened, what he saw?
That would be really convenient for Aemond if that happens. That was one thing I wanted to bring up was like that felt really intentional.
Yeah.
And you could see it in Aegon's face in the moments that he realized his brother was going to rotisserie him.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, why did Aegon even bring Sunfire here? Sunfire is not like battle hardened or experienced like Vhagar and Meleys are. Sunfire is a baby in comparison.
Yeah, Sunfire really deserved better. And that little spot where Sunfire kind of like booped him with the snout, I was like, man, don't make me like this dragon so much knowing what's gonna happen.
Look, girl, that's a good looking dragon. I'd be
right?
stoked to have a gold dragon.
Right?
Well, I mean, Sunfire actually, this is kind of a spoiler, but Sunfire actually survives this. He can just never fly again, correct?
I believe in the books that's what
Yeah, I'm not saying
happened.
that that's what's going to happen
Yeah.
here, but it's
Yeah.
that would be I could imagine that would be a hard life for a dragon never being able to take flight again.
Right? These dragons deserve better. I always really liked Meleys just because I think I like the concept design of Meleys so
Oh,
much.
me too.
The horns and everything, like the spikes, very cool, very punk rock of her, but also she's got that kind of like Godzilla quality, like the deep, big chest and kind of like more dinosaur looking than, some of the dragons are much more elegant and like aerodynamic looking, but
Right.
she's just kind of like bulky and scary looking. But like, man, like these dragons deserve better.
I will say this, there is nothing more majestic than watching a dragon burn a group of men.
Yes. That and like the scene where the blood is pouring out of the dragon and just burning people alive. Like
Yeah,
the boiling hot dragon blood was a really nice touch.
it was. It was a really nice touch.
I'm also surprised how stealthy Vhagar can be. I mean,
Okay, I'm glad you noticed that because Vhagar seems to have a signature move called like hide and attack.
yeah.
Hide then attack. Because that's exactly what Vhagar did to Lucerys and then
Yeah.
pulled the same move on Rhaenys and Meleys. Came up out of nowhere from underneath and was like, boom, I got you.
Yeah. And I think like it's probably hard to choreograph this in terms like they film it and it's just, the actors writing on moving like machines and then they have to CGI everything.
Yeah.
So like I wonder how closely they got to what they initially intended in terms of like what they can and can't do physically to like make the scene work.
Okay,
But
yeah.
I do appreciate that you could actually see this happening. Like it wasn't one of those night scenes like Game of Thrones, the last battle at Winterfell with
Girl, don't
the
get me
ice dragon
started on
and
HBO and their night scenes.
like I'm glad that they've kind of moved away from that, but also this whole dragon battle, it's so frustrating seeing Criston Cole survive over and over again. Like he becomes worse and worse as it goes on. Like he saw Aemond with his sword ready to kill his
I
brother.
actually have some questions about this, but after you're done.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I'm assuming Kristen Cole and Aemond are gonna be like, oh, like hush hush, it's cool. Because they're kind of bros at this point. They're pretty much conspiring against the king in the sense of like keeping battle plans from him, which obviously is a terrible decision because as we are seeing like in this episode, had Aegon actually known what was going to happen, things could have been a little bit different for him, but
Absolutely.
oh well.
I have to wonder what Crispy is going to do to reconcile the things that he saw in this day. Because while I don't think he saw Aemond burn Sunfire and Aegon out of the sky, I do think he rolls up on Aemond and he felt afraid that Aemond was there to like finish off Aegon. And he didn't seem like on board for that plan. And
No,
I have to
no.
wonder if what he walked up on, whether Aemond was planning on knifing his brother or not, is going to change the dynamic of their relationship. Because Crispy is always like, my honor, my honor, my honor.
Yes.
And a lot of this episode seems to be about the characters having to reconcile with past decisions and behaviors. And I'm just curious as how old Crispy Cole's going to do that when he gets back.
Well, Crispy has been kind of wallowing in his inner dilemmas with his honor, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's been a big theme for him. And it seems like as time goes on, instead of, like learning from things, accepting things, he's just becoming more and more hypocritical and awful.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't know how that relationship and how that dynamic is going to go forward. Bringing this up, it makes me think of Alicent as well
This
with
is
the
my
moon tea.
this is my favorite Alicent episode. I love her in crash out mode. Like, she
Right?
is a D1 crash out this episode. She's going off the rails with everybody.
No, I love that. I love that scene with Larry's
And the Grand
Laris,
Maester,
Larry's.
Laris, I think. And the
Yeah,
Grand Maester, because the Grand Maester gave her the answer of no, I don't believe Aegon changed his mind in legalese. Because he could have simply said, yes, I think Viserys changed his mind and wanted Aegon. And he was like, I couldn't possibly know.
it's like a very carefully worded email.
Yeah. It was like he consulted with his attorneys before answering. But, like, speaking of Laris, I wish that man would stop being so bold. I would have told him if I were Alicent. I was like, yeah, go ahead and I'll cut your bold ass tongue out.
I love how like I forgot that it was like Harrenhal was under Larissa's keep, under the castle and Simon Strong. But
Right.
like I'm glad they brought that back up and they were like, it's your castle. It's your castle. And he's like, well,
He's not wrong, though.
yeah,
That's
it's
the
a
thing.
lost
He's
cause.
really not wrong. The castle is too big of an endeavor to rebuild. There's like constant problems over there. He's not wrong. Like, Daemon is just going to sit there spinning his wheels and getting more and more frustrated trying to configure something out of Harrenhal.
I'm enjoying Damon at Harrenhal way too much. Like, first off, pretty bold of him to take like I'm assuming it's weirwood sap, but it looks like blood. It looks like she just poured blood into a cup and he's basically like, "Hey, you're a witch." And then he's like, "Hey, gonna drink this blood stuff from you." Like the man wouldn't eat peas last episode, but now he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll drink the thing from the witch."
I
Like,
literally
okay,
have that
Damon.
like I had that in my head. I was like, the man can't eat the venison with no red currant, but he can take a potion from a witch. Where
All
has his
right.
sense gone? Also, watching him read that poor Tully kid for filth in the beginning was an incredible opening scene.
It really was. I loved how he told him like, "Hey, you should just go ahead and smother your grandfather." And this kid is like, "The
Clutching
what?"
his pearls. You want me to do what? I love my Lord Grandsire.
Yeah.
And Damon was like,
Oh,
wait, what do you mean? You're not looking to like take over early? The way
sweet
he
summer
said,
child.
call the Blackwoods, I need somebody who's willing.
Oh,
And then it became like a weird where the Blackwood man's like, yeah, well, I vied for your wife's hand.
yeah. Oh
You
man.
know, if I were Rhaenyra, I would have been very hesitant to send Daemon anywhere to speak for me. He
Oh,
has he
same.
has literally zero track record of staying on track with the plan.
No, and I love how like war's breaking out and he's just like what is he doing
I don't
actually?
know. He's
Like
subjugating the Riverlands in the most offensive way possible. These are supposed to be their allies, and he is just like doing everything he can to upset these people.
right. And let's be real, how many of the Blackwoods are left after that whole burning mill incident? So like the saying like you catch more flies with honey than vinegar? Damon's out here like, yeah, kill your grandfather. Like, okay. All right.
The look on Simon's strong face when Damon suggests that he kills Lord Grover Tully
It was so good.
was just like, what is this man doing? Why is he here? And why am I having to babysit him?
This is what I'm talking about when a couple episodes ago I was talking about like the tonal shifts in
Mm-hmm.
this season because that actor for Simon Strong he's incredible. It does so much for a show when you get like little looks and glances that legitimately make me laugh that I find like really funny, where it's not like they're making the show slapstick. Like they're injecting humor in it in a way that's not distracting.
Yeah, I would say like the humor is really balanced with the seriousness of the overall show itself.
And then especially in like the sad episode, you need some type of levity, even if it's just, for a millisecond, so that you're not just kind of like in such an intense storyline. And I think season 1, I think that's what lost me, where it was like everything's so intense, like everything's so over the top. And at least this season with some of these characters, we're getting like, I don't want to say like fun, because like, yeah, like having Damon tell that kid like, yeah, go kill your grandpa. Not like not the most traditional sense of fun
Look, I
there,
still
but
think it was
like
funny.
I thought it was hilarious, but I don't know how long Damon's gonna be there. Like, will he be there the rest of the season, just kind of hanging out,
Hmm.
doing his one man Shakespeare in the park, going crazy in the castle?
He is having a time in that castle.
It's very like Mario Brothers Haunted Mansion.
Yes. Yes, it is.
uh,
So, we have that vision of his where he beheads young teen Rhaenyra after she walks down from the Iron Throne. And I think it's interesting that they chose to address that underlying jealousy that he has.
yeah, I think that was a wise choice. I think one of the things that really fuels Damon is this. He seems very into the like Targaryen supremacy of everything, while like also being butt pained about being passed over as, a second son, as not really having his brother's affection like he wants.
Oh, he needs his brother's validation more than anything.
Yeah, and I think with Damon, he's an interesting character in that aspect, but I'm also like saying all of this. There there is a character in the book who is able to ride a dragon without being a Targaryen. And man, if you really just wanted to add like another low blow to Daemon Targaryen's psyche of like, we're Targaryens, we're pretty great. Even his relationship with his daughters, like he's pretty chill with the one who can ride a dragon, but the other one, it's whatever.
He is the worst parent in Westeros, honestly.
But like if you really want to send Damon through like the ringer, introduce that character who can ride a dragon without being Targaryen and watch his entire
Ego
reality.
disintegrate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that can't think of a better storyline for Damon, but I don't know if they'll do it.
It's interesting that you say that because, like, if you think back to season 1, when Viserys takes Rhaenyra down into like the basement levels of, the Red Keep and ask her what she sees when she looks at the dragon. And obviously, we all know she gives the right response. She says that without the dragons, the Targaryens are no more than anybody else, and that the dragons are what gives them that illusion of power. Daemon does not have that same mindset. And I think that's a big part of why his brother inevitably ended up passing on him as the heir.
Ooh, that's a good call. Yeah, yeah. Damon, and also, I don't know why I just thought of this, but like, what is Caraxes doing while Damon is just like in the castle,
I would assume just flying around eating sheep or something.
right? I don't know. I'm curious where they take this Damon plotline. I hope that it's not too much more time like him just having trippy visions in Harrenhal, because at some point like I'm enjoying it now, but I don't know like how much longer they can go on with that. I
Right.
kind of feel like next episode, like we're gonna have to regroup, right?
I would
But
imagine so.
also the fallout on both sides is going to be pretty intense. And at that point, are we going to see both sides come up with new plans? Because as you said, this whole like dragon v dragon thing, not not the greatest idea, or are
No.
they gonna double down?
The only way I really foresee them being able to continue doing Dragon v Dragon is you're gonna have to like Rhaenyra's gonna have to send multiple dragons who have fighting experience out to fight Vhagar at one time, and they're
Right.
gonna lose some, and that's just how do you decide which ones you're gonna lose? Because you're gonna have to send your best fighters. You already lost your best fighter in Meleys,
Hmm.
and now you've got much more inexperienced dragons. I mean, Caraxes is an experienced battle dragon, but Syrax, is she an experienced battle dragon? Because I thought Syrax was more experienced than, egg laying than anything. And I
I
don't
don't
mean that like
know.
disrespectfully towards that dragon or anything, but you know, a lot of the dragons that are on the rosters are dragons that were born roughly around the same time as their riders, and they've never seen war or battle. Like each side has one fighting dragon now. Well, one
Yeah,
experienced fighting dragon.
right. And then the other dragons that are big or may have experience are riderless,
Right.
except for Daemon's dragon. I mean, Sea Smoke has seen battle. We saw that in season one, but I don't believe that we're getting our Laenor back. So like at this point, I feel like they kind of have to make the leap and start being like, hey, we gotta get these writers for dragons going because this should be like the warning, right? Like Vhagar just absolutely destroyed Meleys. Like that wasn't even a fair fight. And Meleys is like their best fighter. So now what?
Yeah. I mean, they still have Caraxes, but he's off with Daemon on the other side of Westeros.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of where I would put this in like my season 2 like ratings. I think it was a really good episode, but I'm also kind of not so into it, maybe just because it was so sad that I'm like, it was all right. I think it was just too much. Like it was too emotional losing all those dragons.
I didn't want to
Well,
see
injuring all these dragons.
Rhaenys go either. That was a
No,
huge character
no.
loss for me. She was one of my favorite characters.
I'm still really upset. I think the actress just was incredible. I really, really wish that we would have been able to spend more time with her before this episode. Because, like, it was just, little snippets here and there, some words of wisdom with Rainey's, and then, like, gone way too soon, way too fast, where I'm like, oh no. I did really feel for her in that moment where she's falling and she's just completely like resigned. Like that's it. Like you almost get the idea she's thinking like I'm going to be with, my dead daughter and son and she's just like this is it. Her dragon's done. She's done. It almost felt like a suicide mission in the aspect where like she kept coming back.
Yeah. There was one point when I was watching where I was like, girl, just fly away. Just
Yeah.
fly away. When Vhagar hit the ground, I would have
Mhm.
flown away.
Oh,
I
same.
would I would have been out of there. I would have been like, you know what? This is not a winnable situation. I got to try and get away. At least try to get away and regroup.
Well, yeah, and like you want the intel too. I mean, if she can get that information back to Dragonstone quickly, you can plan for like the next event, right? But with her dying, I mean, the castle is taken anyways, whether she runs or stays. Could she have really believed that she could have taken on Vhagar? Or was this like a kamikaze move where it was like, I'm gonna die. I might as well like do as much damage as I can before the inevitable.
And that could be it. Also, not leaving could have something to do with not wanting to lure Vhagar to Dragonstone.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Huh.
Because I don't know as though they're necessarily ready to take on a dragon of the magnitude of Vhagar at Dragonstone.
Right? She was in a pickle, I guess.
definitely in a pickle.
So, do you know who else kind of has, I'm going back to this. We haven't done this in so long, but our Smog Award.
Ooh.
So for people who don't know, Laura and I every so often when we do videos, we'll give out a Smog Award to like the most theatrical, just pretty much the character that we like the best, or just
The one that brings the most theatrics.
yeah, yeah. Do you know who I just every time that I see them, they keep getting closer to the Smaug Award?
Who?
Gwen Hightower.
Yes, I really, really enjoy Gwen Hightower. The way that he never ceases to give Crispy a hard time.
Right?
He's like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care how many times Crispy is shown to have good ideas. I'm just going to keep prodding at him.
I felt like Gwen Hightower in this episode where, he's like looking up, like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, Crispy has like brought them into this situation. He's watching Crispy behead people, doing some, like shady stuff, but it's war, whatever. And then he's like, okay, like now we're gonna go do this battle on Rook's Rest. It's an easy target. I don't know how important this castle is to anything.
Doesn't Rook's Rest cut Dragonstone off from supply lines? If it's, well, now that it's taken.
Possibly, but like don't the blacks have pretty much all of like the Valerian fleet as well? So like is that
Yeah, they do.
cutting off just land supply or both land and sea?
I think it just cuts off mainland supply.
Okay. Okay.
You know, one of my favorite moments with Gwen Hightower this episode is where he's kind of going back and forth with Crispy. And Crispy's like, what are you, a coward? And he's like, worse, I'm rational.
That sealed the deal for me. I
Yeah.
was like, yep,
I
I'm
was
a
like,
fan.
I'm a fan. Because that's being
You're
rational.
speaking my language.
Being rational can create fear, but it's also a lot different than like thoughts driven by fear. And what he was saying was very rational. I do get where Crispy was coming from. He was like, nobody expects us to pop up during the day and pull up on somebody, so let's do that. But at the same time, you do run the risk of dragon oversight in the skies.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like that's another thing too, where it's like this whole event orchestrated by Crispy, to me personally, doesn't feel like he's in it to cut off supply chain. It kind of feels like he's in it just because he knows that this is going to be something that really hurts Rhaenyra's council.
Absolutely.
Because this dude on the council is like, oh my God. The one guy was like, what about my father? And they're like beheaded. And so now he's going for number two, where like he's doing the things like in a very personal way that just makes him that much more despicable.
I will give him credit though where it's due. He does have good ideas to shake up the like systems of battle that they're commonly using, because he is doing a lot of things that surprise the blacks.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's the one thing that I was hoping where we would at least see something about Crispy that's like, okay, like he's not just handsome hypocrite guy. He's actually like coming with some ideas. But speaking of speaking of Crispy and the Kingsguard, I laughed so hard at Aemon's Kingsguard just being like weirdos this episode. Like the one shot of his Kingsguard kind of like standing there with that like dopey tugging at his collar. And then
Yeah.
at another point, the two Kingsguard like run into each other. And then Alicent reads him to Aegon to filth about like, what are you doing? Just like electing more incompetent dumbasses around you? Like just sit down, do nothing. Nobody needs your help. Nobody wants your help. And I was like, "Oh my God, ice cold.
Aegon
Ice
gets
cold."
Aegon gets read for filth a couple times. First by his brother in a weird, like, High Valyrian public shaming moment.
Right.
I mean, Aemon knows that he can't just come out and say it, but he does come out and say it in High Valyrian, and then we realize that Aegon doesn't really speak High Valyrian, which is,
Yeah.
further evidence of how unserious he actually is. But when
Mm-hmm.
Alicent starts going in on him, she has the blatant audacity to say, I thought you would ascend the throne and like be humble and learn from those around you. Girl, what are you talking about? How did you think that? Did you just
Right.
ignore every bit of evidence that you'd been shown from like the time this he was a child, and you were like, "Oh, he's going to have this great epiphany moment and start behaving when he's crowned?" Like, did you really think that? Like for real for real? Or is she just like, compensating for her own failures in that?
I think a little bit of both. I
Not
think she's kind of delusional, so I wouldn't put it past her to think like, okay, like we made all these sacrifices to get him on the throne. Things will be fine. Like we did all this hard work, now we can relax for a little bit. She's finding out that's not true,
well, I think she's delusional in the idea that any of her children should sit the throne.
right?
Not one of them, not one is throne worthy.
No, no. And again, again, I'm gonna bring up Helena because
I mean, that's not really a drag on her, but she should not be sitting the throne by any means.
no, no, agreed. But thinking about her, I would have really loved more time with Helena in the same way that would have loved more time with Rhaenys. But it kind of seems like there's just not enough episodes for that wish list
Oh,
of
I
mine.
100% agree.
There was some interesting Massaria, like kind of creeping in the background
I
moments this
noticed that
episode.
too, but at the same time, like, and I don't mean this as like harsh criticism when I say it, but we've had so many smaller scenes that have led to loose ends that I'm just kind of viewing it as we'll see if that even correlates to anything or if it was just there.
Right. And that's the thing, like I don't know if they're doing it to be like, "Hey, don't forget about her. Like she still exists." Or if it's
Gonna actually mean something.
yeah,
Yeah, I just some of the scenes, like some of these smaller scenes that we see, and I know that I've talked about this before, but because they become like these loose ends that are never really tied up, well, at least not so far, it's getting hard for me to like really put a lot of investment into those scenes when I see them. Because I'm like, I have no idea if this is going anywhere.
agreed. Do you know what I really hope pays off from this episode?
Hmm.
Before Rhaenys is killed, she meets up with,
Corliss.
well, first she meets up with Alan of Hull.
Yeah, Corliss got kind of mad about that too.
He did. He did, but she's like, I know who he is. Like, I know he's one of your bastards. He's the one who dragged you out of the water. He should be, given something for like what he's done. Kind of like telling Corliss, hey, just because he's a bastard doesn't mean like he needs to be, I don't know, like your errand boy, your boat rower guy. I don't know what he does. Nothing important. But she's like, hey, give the man his dues. He saved your life.
Yeah, stop keeping him such a like intense secret.
Right, right. Those are most likely going to be like the last conversation that, at least that we've seen on screen between the two of them. Are those words going to become really important to Corlys? And is he going to act on that? And is he going to kind of like make that something that he does out of like his respect for Rhaenys now that she's gone, honor her wishes? And then that's where we like start bringing in more
Ooh.
dragon seed stuff.
That's a really good. I really like that idea.
Right? It seems like a good way to kind of like honor her now that she's gone. And also, like they don't have children any longer.
Yeah. Corliss is really like taken huge losses at this point.
Really. And he's really been probably the most pro Rhaenyra person in this in this part of time because
I would
he's really
agree.
given it his all. The shipping lanes are under his protection. Rhaenys just sacrificed herself. They sacrificed a dragon. They sacrificed their kids. They've sacrificed their children's well-being by like marrying them to the Targaryens.
Yeah.
They are owed something.
Yeah, I mean, I do get why, like, Valerians and Targaryens are quick to marry each other. It does make sense to me. But Corlys is going to have a lot on his plate, and he's going to need to be making big decisions while that's happening. And it'll be really interesting to see how those last moments with Rhaenys play out for him.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that plot line I'm probably the most invested in, I want to say.
I wish we would get more than just like 30-second snippet scenes, though.
Agreed. Don't get me wrong, I like the show, but like it's just so hard to get really invested in some of these characters. There was more emotion and I don't know, there was more emotion and more connection and love in these scenes between the humans and their dragons than I think we've seen in almost the entire show between human and human.
Yeah.
Like after Lucerys's death, maybe Rhaenyra and Jace hugging it out, that was pretty touching. But like we have all of these relationships and like it seems like the human and dragon one is the one that they like really went out of their way to show. But like human and human, maybe it's just there and I'm not latching onto it as hard as I could be, or maybe I'm not seeing something that is there. These other characters that they started bringing in, like Ulf the White and Hugh with like the sick child, these little moments with them and Corley's bastards, I feel like there's a lot of like really strong potential in these relationships to come out of this season and be like, okay, wow, like they're really including a lot that makes the story just
I think it gives it
I don't
more depth.
just more depth, more color, more life, more of everything instead of just like these intense Targaryens being weird all the time.
You know, after the Dance of Dragons, and then, we have some time, and then we eventually get to Ares, the Mad King, you can't really blame anybody for wanting the Targaryens out of power.
No, no. I can't see how after this, after the Dance of Dragons, anybody is like, oh yeah, great, a Targaryen. Yay. No. Well, I guess maybe once the dragons are gone, but still,
I'm interested to see where we go from here, how they unravel the story from here. Because we both know, like, what technically should happen based on the book, but I am curious to see is where the show goes with it.
true. And I think if one thing this episode did really well, even if, there were some things where I was like, kind of, I'm gonna have to like suspend my belief on that a little bit. The one thing that I felt like that was handled really nicely was, and it's not even that important,
Well,
but
now I'm dying to know what it is.
well, in a Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, when Daenerys gets her dragons, people first off are just like, no, like that's not true. That can't be true. The dragons are dead. And once she starts gaining power, taking cities, when word gets back to Westeros that she's alive and she has dragons, now like it really clicks into place for me. People like Robert Baratheon being like, we've got to kill her and we've got to control this situation because, Daenerys, that's a problem, but like
That's
dragons,
a bigger
like
problem.
that's, yeah, yeah. And like this episode is finally the first episode that I think that I've seen in the entire franchise where I was like, yep. Yeah.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier on, which is this is a much different scenario when both sides have dragons. Like on the two far sides, we have Aegon the Conqueror with his dragons, but he's the only one with dragons. And then on the other far side of the timeline, we have Daenerys and her three dragons. But again, they're the both of those like far points of the timeline both experience their like assault on Westeros with being the only one with dragons. Now, in the center here, we've got Targaryen against Targaryen fighting it out in the skies.
And like you said, the only people who are going to really lose from this are the small folk.
Yeah. I mean, look, think about the scenes where Vhagar falls from the sky while fighting with Meleys. And then Vhagar gets up and just starts crushing everything around her, which, I mean, I get it. She's, large and in charge. But, in her efforts to get back up into the sky, she kills a bunch of small folk.
Yeah, just like people running and screaming.
And honestly, Rhaenyra is the only Targaryen who has any concern for the actual citizens of Westeros.
I think it does make sense that they spent so much time on the will they or won't they.
Absolutely.
Because at first I was worried. I was like, you know what? Like, I don't care. Let's just, commence with the fighting,
Loose
right?
the dragons.
Yes. Loose the dragons. But after this episode, I can say I'm appreciative that they did go there with her character, because now that there's the payoff that I saw in this episode, I'm like, okay, I get behind it. I get it. The meeting with her and Alicent, yeah, it's far-fetched, like her sneaking in, whatever. But I think that it was all right.
Rhaenyra's been taking blow after blow.
Yeah.
And one thing that I just thought about was when they're having the small council meeting in this episode, and Rhaenyra's like, I'll go to Rook's Rest, and Rhaenys is like, no, I'm gonna go, and it has to be me. Like, you could tell on Rhaenyra's face the absolute dread she felt at the idea of losing Rhaenys.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily just about losing Meleys as well. I think that she felt genuinely dreadful about losing Rhaenys, because Rhaenys is about the only person Rhaenyra really has to talk to.
Yeah, they have a lot in common, just in terms of the surface level. They're both women, but on top of that, I do think that Rhaenyra lost her mother at a young age, and Rhaenys has always kind of been at least around the corner, and sometimes a little bit direct with her and look, this is the way things are. But Rhaenys is also the logical one, I would say. And we've seen it at the small council meetings where these people are just getting pretty belligerent. I mean, the small council is pretty much like me last week, where I'm like, all right, release the dragons, let's go. Let's go. And Rhaenys is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But also, whenever the small council is just talking shit, she's backing Rhaenyra up. And Rhaenyra cannot lose people like that. We've seen the vultures around her.
Yeah, and I know Rhaenyra has Daemon too, but he doesn't have...
Daemon's an idiot.
The reputation or the influence to have a positive effect for her in those small council meetings.
No, he's out there planning child killings. Well, not on purpose child killings, but
he's the only person who doesn't realize that everyone is tolerating him because of his brother and his niece.
Any hopes for next episode? I haven't watched the trailer for the next episode. Have you?
I did. I don't necessarily have any hopes. I am really curious, though, to see where Corlys goes from here. And I'm especially curious to see if he starts pushing for Rhaenys' big want, which is to get Baela as the heir to Driftmark.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder how Corlys feels about that now that Rhaenys is gone.
Interesting. I know what happens in the book. I think I know. I think I remember.
See, I don't remember that part.
If I spoiler warning. Well, maybe it's a spoiler because I could have misremembered. But...
It may or may not be a spoiler.
Yeah. I think in the books he makes Alan or Adam of Hole the heir to Driftmark.
Yeah, I don't really like that. He really struggles with the idea of women holding any position of authority.
Yeah.
That's not to say I dislike him as a character or anything. I think he should have just given more weight to what Rhaenys was asking for, which is to put their direct descendants on the Driftwood throne.
Yeah. Yeah, and how sneaky would it be if he was like, okay, like I won't give it to Bela, even though that was what Rhaenys really wanted. But instead, I'm going to take Rhaenys' very sound advice and gift this Alan guy, give him something that he deserves.
I mean, there's that. There's
Y-
that.
That would be a very good way for him to, gaslight himself into thinking he's doing the right thing.
It would be, but I have to wonder if he ultimately does the wrong thing because we know that 172 years from now, the Valerian family has been extinguished.
Yep.
And I have to wonder if the doom of the Valerian family starts now.
Here. Yeah. Well, Corley's, don't mess it up.
Yeah, buddy, don't
Don't
mess
mess
it
it
up.
up.
Don't be the one.
All right. Thanks for listening. If you have any delightful comments, leave them down below. If I got my memory mixed up and misremembered things, go ahead and tell me. I don't care about spoilers, neither does Laura. So we will be back next week. Thanks for watching, like, and subscribe, and we will see you then.